welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this super great chunky hat. This hat is so fun to make and you can get it done in no time. It uses big needles, jumbo yarn, and you get to make a super great pom-pom. You can make this hat as a quick gift for somebody in your life, or maybe you just need a quick hat to throw on so that you can hit the slopes later on today. You're gonna love this hat pattern. It's a free pattern over on marleybird.com. You can find the link to the pattern and all the materials list right down there in the video description box below. While you're down there, smash that like button so that other people know you enjoyed this video. Get your pattern, gather your materials, join me back here, and we will get started. Take a look down here. Let me show you what you need. You need 2 balls of Red Heart collage yarn, which is a size 7 or jumbo weight yarn. You'll also need a pair of 9mm or US size 13 knitting needles, a tapestry needle, I prefer bent tip tapestry needles, a good pair of scissors, and a pom-pom maker. Let's jump in and make this really great hat. I'm going to start off my demonstration today with the colorway Frozen. And what you want to do is go ahead and take off the ball band and find your yarn on the outside. There we go, right here. We are going to do an alternative long tail cast on to start this project because it is a great transition from the cast on to the garter stitch. In order to do the long tail cast on, you need a tail that is long enough to go around your head 3 times. So go ahead and about like that, right? About that far. You want to get that 3 times total. The reason you want to do that is you need to make sure that your tail is long enough so that way you don't run out as you're casting on stitches. Once you get 3 times the amount or the circumference of your hat, go ahead and give yourself a little bit of extra wiggle room, and we're going to place a slip knot right at that point. To make a slip knot, you will put the tail of your yarn in the palm of your hand. Take your working yarn, wrap it around your forefinger and your middle finger, and come back up. Once you come back up, cross that yarn over. Turn your hand, go underneath the first loop and grab the back loop and off. You've now created a slip knot that we can place directly onto our needle. Grab your size 13 needle. Now I am going to mention here, there are a lot of stitches you're going to be placing on this needle. So if you choose to use a 13 circular needle and use it as a straight needle, you absolutely could do that. And I will show you what that looks like as we get further along in the process. But right now I am casting on into, these are 12-inch length needles. You might want to use longer needles for your total cast on. You take your needle and you place your slip knot directly onto your needle. Make sure your tail is over to the left and your working yarn is over here to the right. Let's go ahead and grab myself some more yarn so we have something to work with. And this is what we want to do. You have your tail right here. I want you to grab your tail just like so. And I want to take your thumb and you're going to scoop it around your tail. Once you do that, you take your needle, go here to the bottom of your thumb and go up your thumb. Take your working yarn, wrap it around your needle, and now this wrap, we're going to pull it through that stitch that's on our thumb because we've created this sort of window there. Watch as my needle comes through that window. You see that? Now that that stitch has come through that window, it's resting on the needle. So we no longer need this stitch that's on our thumb, so we let it fall off. Give your tail a pull, and now you have a stitch cast on. Let's do that again. Grab your tail, scoop your thumb around, take your needle, go up your thumb, take your working yarn, wrap it around your needle, and now we want to take that wrap that we just did and our needle and go through that window. Once it's through that window, we no longer need the yarn that's on our thumb, so we let it fall off. Give it a tug and pull. So we have 3 stitches because our slip knot counts as the first stitch. So we're going to do another one. Grasp our yarn, scoop up the thumb, around the needle, out the window, off the thumb. Now, what's really great about this long tail cast on method is that 1, it's really easy for beginners to get. There is another way to do the long tail method with just one hand. And if you want more instructions on how to do that, go ahead and click that little I button right there, and it will take you to a video that I've done to show you how to do a long tail cast on with one hand. But if that is a struggle for you, this is the same thing. This is the same method. You're just holding the yarn in two hands and making the motion. Let's do it one more time, and then we're going to go ahead and let you cast on the number of stitches you need for your hat. You grasp your tail, take your thumb, scoop around that yarn, take your needle, go up the yarn that's on your thumb, wrap your working yarn around the needle, take your needle and go through that window. Let the yarn fall off your thumb, give the tail portion a pull, and you have another stitch cast on. Go ahead and cast on the number of stitches you need for your hat. I've gone ahead and cast on a smaller number of stitches on my needle for this demonstration. You will have more stitches than this on your needle, and that's perfect. You'll notice that you have this nice ridge at the bottom of your needle before you put it in your left hand, and that is what we want. That is the bottom portion of our hat, so we want to make sure that's nice and clean and looks beautiful. Now what we will do is take this needle with all of our stitches, put it in your left hand, and when you put it in your left hand, the first thing you'll notice is you have all of these bumps now. Those are purl bumps. Whenever you do a knit stitch, the back side of that knit stitch is a purl. So now that we're looking on the back side of those knit stitches, we are going to see purls. And that's very important because we want to make sure that when we go into this first stitch here, that we actually see that purl bump. The reason here is that all too often people will try and tighten up that stitch by pulling their yarn up just like so. And you'll notice what that does is it makes it look like there's two stitches when there really is only one. By pulling your yarn up like this, all you've done is pull up this purl bump here, and you've not really tightened a stitch at all. So don't worry about that first stitch being a little bit loose. If it is, it's going to be perfectly fine because we're going to seam this hat up and it'll get hidden away if it becomes a problem later on. All right, so grab your other needle and we are going to actually start knitting, which is all we do for this entire hat. You take your right hand needle and going from left to right into that stitch, we will just go from left to right directly into that stitch. Take our yarn, wrap it around our needle, and just like when we wrapped our yarn around the needle and then had to come through the window of the thumb, we're going to come through the window of this stitch right there. So you take your needle and you come right through that window, just like we did when we did the thumb. Now, just like we did when we did all this on the thumb, this stitch is no longer needed. So just like when we let it fall off the thumb, we're going to let it fall off the needle. Now we have one stitch. Let's do this again. Imagine, let's get that little tail out of the way. Imagine this stitch right here is the one that's on your thumb and that your needle is your thumb, okay? This is exactly what we're doing. We're going up the thumb, around the needle, out the window, off the thumb, right? Up the thumb, around the needle, out the window, off the thumb. Up the thumb, around the needle, out the window, off the thumb. Pretty cool, right? See why the long tail cast on is a really good start to the garter stitch, and for beginners it really shows you how to work the knit stitches because you're essentially replicating that when you do the long tail cast on. Now because I don't want to keep referring to my needle as a thumb, I'm going to use the words that I typically use when I teach beginner knitters. We're going to go in the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch. You can see here that on your left-hand needle, you're starting to get a really nice row of stitches. You want to make sure you are not pulling your needles apart. You want to keep them at a really nice, comfortable distance where it looks like one stitch flows evenly to the next one. You don't want those stretched out. So you go in the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch. Let's go ahead and knit all of these stitches down this row. When you get to the end of the row, you will knit the very last stitch just like you have been going all along and let it come off. Now your left hand needle no longer has stitches on it, and all your stitches are on your right hand needle. It's perfectly natural if your work is starting to look like this here at the start. We do want to take a minute though and just straighten it all out. So just make sure all those nice stitches we just did, that they're flowing from down our needle. We want all of our work to flow down the needles. We absolutely do not want to hold our needles like this with our work showing up here. We always want our work flowing down. So it's best after you finish the row, straighten everything out, make sure it looks good, and go ahead and repeat the process. Put that needle in your left hand, grab your spare needle, make sure you don't stretch out that first stitch, go in the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch, all the way down the row. You carry on knitting every row for this hat pattern until the body of the hat measures the number given on the pattern. Depending on what size you make, that will determine how big your hat needs to be. As you're working along, you're going to notice that you're getting horizontal ridges on your fabric, which is perfectly normal. That's called garter stitch. When you knit every single row, when you're working something flat, you get garter stitch. Side note, you can also get it by purling every row if that's what you want to do. These garter stitch rows create a really cool ridge, and so these ridges are going to be responsible for allowing your hat to lay flat on your head. It's not going to roll up like a typical stockinette stitch would. As you're working along on your hat project, there will come a time when you need to add a new ball of yarn. You always want to add your new ball of yarn at the end of a row. By adding your new ball of yarn at the end of the row, you're making sure that you have an easy place for you to weave in your tail somewhere in the seam. You're also making sure that should that area where you're adding a new ball of yarn come loose, it's not in the middle of your hat, so you won't get some sort of big hole in the middle of your hat. So you always want to add your new ball of yarn at the end of a row. To add a new ball of yarn, it's really super easy. At the end of the row, when it's time to change yarns, you would grab your new ball of yarn. Let's just use this one for an example. And I would take my new ball of yarn. I'm simply going to just tie an overhand knot directly onto my old yarn. You can see the pink is just tying directly onto the blue, and I'm going to give it a pull. I want to make sure I leave at least 4 to 6 inches. I take that yarn, pull it right on up to the needle, and now I'm going to ignore my old yarn, ignore this tail, and I will simply start knitting with the new ball of yarn. So I go in just like normal, and I just start knitting with my new ball of yarn. One thing I want to point out is over here, these tails are just going to hang out there. Don't worry about them. We'll weave those in later. So you would go in, around your needle, out and off, in, around, out, off, and you would continue on. Now obviously your new ball of yarn will be the same color, and so it won't have a distinguished mark like this, but that's how you would add a new ball of yarn. Once you have reached the measurement for the body of your hat, your work is going to look a little something like this. Here's a hat I've been working on. I'm using the colorway Dollhouse. I think it is so pretty. And this is an example of what you could do, or this is how you could put your stitches on circular needles, so that way you don't have them all crammed onto straight needles, and you just treat them as if it is a straight needle. So nothing is joined, each needle is still independent of each other. We have reached the measurement for this size hat that I am making, and you'll notice I have all these really nice garter stitch ridges, and because this yarn has a really cool subtle striping to it, I have a really cool effect going on. Over here you can see where I joined a new ball of yarn. My yarn is just hanging out, just like I told you to do, and we are ready to pull together the top of this hat. Now, I have decided to make this as easy as possible for beginners. So we aren't going to do knit two togethers. We're simply going to cut some tail, weave it through all of the live stitches, and then use that tail to seam up our hat. If you're an experienced knitter and you would like to do knit two togethers and then knit row and then knit two togethers, you absolutely could do that. I'm going to leave that up to you. But for this hat demonstration, we're going to make it as easy as possible. To do this, what we need to do is have a tail that's long enough for us to go through all of these stitches and seam up our edge. So make sure you leave a nice long tail for yourself because we don't want to have to rejoin later. So I think that is plenty long enough. So I'm going to just snip my tail and my hat is free. I'm now going to grab my bent tip tapestry needle that I showed you at the beginning. And these are some of my favorite needles, and so I highly recommend them. If you take your bent tip tapestry needle and take your yarn and just pinch it right around the eye of the needle, pull your needle out, and then you should be able to wiggle your yarn right through the eye of that needle. Pretty nifty, right? Pretty easy. What we will do now is we are going to thread our yarn through all of these stitches that are live on our needle. And I don't want to thread it as if we're purling. I want to thread just like we were knitting. So I'm going to take my needle, go into each stitch as if I were going to knit it, only this time I'm going to pull my yarn all the way through that stitch and then let that stitch fall off. I will do this all the way down the needle so that way all of the stitches are nice and secure. It's through, fall off. I am to my last one. I'm going to thread it through and sweet. My needles are free. Set those aside. And as I pull this around, you can see I have the tail threaded through all of those live stitches. What I want to do now is I want to give that tail a nice pull, but I want to be gentle not to accidentally pull the yarn apart. You have to be very cautious of that, okay? And we're going to pull it until the top of our hat closes down. Now you do have an option here. You can close it to where there's still a little opening and create yourself a messy bun hat, or you can close it completely closed and then we'll seam it all closed later on. I like to use a little bit of cotton thread to do that to make sure it's nice and secure. And so we're going to do it that way. But if you wanted to make a messy bun hat, you totally could. Just close it down to where you still have a little bit of an opening and then secure that opening. All right, here we go. You ready? This is like one of my most favorite parts. It's so gratifying. So I'm just going to start pulling my tail. And when I do that, it's like pulling everything like a drawstring. Can you see how it's pulling together like a drawstring? So what will happen here is the top of my hat will be pulled all nice together. And you might have to wiggle it just a little bit to get so that the first ones here are nice and pulled tight. And give this a nice tug. Again, be careful because this yarn could break on you, and it's a lot of stitches. You see that, how it's coming together like a nice little drawstring right there. So at this point, if I wanted to take my tail and start threading it through all those stitches again, I could leave that nice and open for a messy bun hat. How cool is that? But because I want it to be nice and tight, I'm actually going to take my tapestry needle, which still has my yarn attached, and I am going to thread it through some of these and begin to pull it even tighter because I want it to be really nice and snug as I can get it with this yarn. And then I will go back with Aunt Lydia's yarn and seam it as closed as possible. All right, so that's about as closed as I can get it with this yarn. You can see there's a little bit of a hole there, and it's because of the thickness of the yarn and the number of stitches we have. If we decided to do a knit two together around to get down to fewer stitches, that would help with this problem, but because I wanted to make this as easy as possible for beginners, I just wanted to use just the knit stitches. You'll see here I'm threading my needle with the yarn back through these stitches just to give them a little bit more security. Okay, I'm giving them a little bit pull. I'm getting a little bit tighter up there at the top. What's awesome here is I'm going to go back with Aunt Lydia's cotton thread to seam that closed a little bit better. But I'm also going to put a pom-pom up there, which is going to hide any sort of hole I get. So it's going to not even be visible at all. But again, this is for an absolute beginner, quick hat project. I mean, I made the body of this hat in less than an hour, so you can totally do this. You'll see I'm literally just going through all of these stitches just to make them that much more secure, okay? You don't want the top of your hat coming undone. That would stink. This, what I'm doing right now, is exactly what you would do if you had a messy bun portion too. You just would have a bigger hole going on right there. Can you see that? See where that's all happening? So you're just making it nice and secure. And I'm coming back to where I started, where my portion is that I'm going to seam. See, there's my hole. You can see my little finger right there. So I can close that. I could actually use my yarn right here and cinch that closed if I want. But because I'm going to use the Aunt Lydia's, let's see, Aunt Lydia's cotton thread for my pom-pom too, I'll just use it to seam that closed and it'll be nice and invisible. So I don't have to use the chunky yarn up there too. All right, now that we have the top closed as much as we can get it until we do a little bit of extra seaming with the cotton thread, we now need to do an invisible join. I'm going to show you how to do the invisible garter stitch seam with the yarn already on your hat, so it's already attached. That's why we needed that really long tail. You want to position your hat with the top of the hat closest to you and the tail coming from this portion right between where the two seams are going to come together, okay? So this is the right side of your hat. We will do all the seaming on the right side of the hat, which means it's the public side. It's the side that goes on the outside of your head. These garter stitches right here, you can see these ridges all line up with each other. So there's a ridge on each side. What we are going to do is we'll take our yarn and working into this outside bump right here of this ridge, starting on the, you can start on the right side or the left side, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go into this outside bump and then pull my yarn through. Now I'll go to the corresponding outside bump. Let's make sure I get the outside bump so I'm keeping it the same all the way through. And I pull my yarn through. I don't accidentally get myself a knot. Now working back over on the right side for my example, I go through the outside bump and I pull my yarn through. Once again, we go to the corresponding side, go to outside bump and pull our yarn through. Now my yarn is already attached at the top of the hat, but say you wanted to work this process using two maybe garter stitch squares that you want to seam together to make a blanket. You could absolutely just join in your new yarn by using like the figure 8 stitch and have the yarn attached and then go through this entire process. So it is really simple. Just make sure you go back and forth, making sure that the ridges line up. When you get to the end, you'll notice that you have a tail down here. That was your beginning cast on tail. And you want to go ahead and finish off just like you've been doing all along, having these two edges meet up. All right. And then we will take all of our tails and we'll flip the hat inside out. Our cozy little hat here. This is a great little hat. And we have all these tails and we'll simply weave them in. So I'm going to trim up this tail. Obviously, I did give myself a lot of extra tail, which was perfect because nothing worse than having to seam up and having to rejoin yarn because you didn't, estimate enough. But I will go ahead and thread on this shorter tail and just working my way up here right along the seam, I'm going to tuck in my ends. So I'm working up along my seam stitches here and I'm going up and then I'll just follow the path and kind of come back down. I feel like that is nice and secure right there. Oh, if I can pull that last one through, come on, have it stuck. There we go. Nice and secure right there. Give that a nice snip. I can snip it nice and close because it's secured. And then I take my beginning tail and I do the same thing. So go ahead and thread it onto your tapestry needle and weave in those ends. You'll also weave in your ends that you did for your join. Just untie that knot and weave these in the same way you do this. Once all your tails are woven in, you can go ahead, come back here to the top and seam this closed if you would like to do that, or leave it and just add a pom-pom. I'm going to show you what I would do to seam this closed, and it's nothing really difficult, honestly. I'm just going to use some Aunt Lydia's fine crochet thread, and it's a cotton Hey, so sorry about that. When I went to edit this video, I realized that I had forgot to hit record on my camera that's right up there. So I have all the footage from this camera, but none from this one. So I redid the hat, and I'm to the point where we were just a couple seconds ago. So let's jump right in. This is where I was. I went ahead and I took some Aunt Lydia's white cotton thread, and I doubled it up, and I put it directly onto my tapestry needle. Working on the inside of the hat, we're going to close this hole. Now, you don't have to do this. This is purely one of those things. If this little tiny hole there bothers you, this is the way you can close it up. So again, I'm on the inside of the hat, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to thread my needle through some of those stitches right there, and I'm going to pull this up. Now, I have a knot down here at the end, so I'm going to put my yarn through that knot just to kind of secure it in place. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go the opposite direction, working through these stitches. And then I'll come back down and I'll go this way again. And what you're going to see here is I'm going to get a figure 8. Can you see that? You see how I have a figure 8? What that does is it really cinches closed the top of the hat. Now I'm just going to rotate my hat a little bit. I'll go in right here on this side, and we'll do the figure 8 one more time. Again, this is not something you absolutely must do. It's just one of those little extra things if you want the top of your hat closed a little bit more. This is one way you could go about doing it. Plus, if you are adding a pom-pom to the top, you don't need to do this at all, right? Like this would be just fine because it would be closed really nice and tight. So it really is not a necessity. It's purely if you want to make sure the top of your hat is nice and closed. Now, once you get to this point, you can go ahead and rotate one more time if you want and do it again. And then all you're going to do is cinch this thread really tight, knot it off with a half hitch knot is what I like to do. I learned to do that from my friend Jill Wiseman, and pull it tight and it's nice and closed. So I feel like that's nice and tight. And you'll notice I do have this, I have 4 strands of white thread here, so that way I can pull it and I don't have to worry about it breaking apart. And I'll do the same thing when it comes to the pom-pom you'll see here in just a minute. And right now I'm just threading through all of this, and I'm going to do the half hitch knot, which is this. So I pull through, you come through the loop that we were getting ready to pull through, and then do it again. So I did it twice, give it a good pull, and you have a really great knot right there. Now, this knot is at the very top of the hat. It's not going to hit the head, so it's not going to interfere with anything. My strands, these strands right here, those are the ones that I started off with. I can nip all of these nice and close. And when I turn the hat right side out, you'll notice that it is really closed and you can't see any sort of closure up there. So this is an option if you want to close that hole on the top, or you could just always plop a pom-pom at the top and make it look super cute. Now, pom-poms are seriously super popular this season. You can actually see that's the hat I finished. That's the one that you guys were watching me make, and it has a really great pom-pom on the top. So I want to show you how to make a pom-pom, which is super simple using the Susan Bates pom-pom maker. Let's do this. Okay, let's make a pom-pom. Pom-poms are super easy and fun to make, especially if you have a tool readily available for you to use in order to make them. For this demonstration, I'm going to use the Susan Bates Easy Wrap Pom-Pom Maker. This pom-pom maker comes with 4 different pom-pom makers in 4 different sizes. You can see them listed right here. It's 1 1/4 inches, 1 3/4 inches, 2 3/4 inches, or 3 1/2 inches. When you open up this packaging, you have a set of instructions and then all of the pom-pom makers. And they look like this. So when you open it up, you'll see that there are 2 sets of each thing. So there are 2 whites, 2 purple, 2 green, and then 2 yellow. These 2 sets then open up and have 2 other sets within one. So you end up having 4 of each one. Does that make sense? So there really are 4 white, 4 purple, 4 green, 4 yellow. We're going to use the yellow for today's demonstration, and I have opened up these sections. So all I've done is I've taken this and I've pulled it apart, okay? Once you've pulled these apart, what you want to do is you want to partner up one piece that has sort of like this hook section and one piece that has the flat section. When they are butted together, you'll notice that they are not flush. They actually have a little bit of an opening there. What that is there is it's created by these little bumps in the pom-pom maker. So when you butt those up just like that, it leaves a little crevice, and that's the perfect spot for us to be able to put our scissors through and actually cut the pom-pom apart. See, pretty cool, huh? So what you will do is once you've butt this up together, you will grab your yarn and you will start wrapping the yarn around the pom-pom maker. Now, it seems a little tricky at first until you get a couple of wraps in, and then it holds together really well. So once you get a couple wraps, you just hold it and start wrapping. And what I like to do is I like to keep track of how many times I go down and back. So that way, when I do this same process on the other half of my pom-pom, I know roughly about how thick this side is, and I can make the next side of my pom-pom about the same thickness. So that was down and back once, so I'm going to go down again. This would make 3, and I'm using the collage yarn, which is a jumbo yarn. I think I'm going to go back one more time. If I were to run out of yarn, say, and needed to add more yarn as I'm going through this process, you absolutely can do that. You don't have to have one long continuous strand of yarn. You could add multiple strands or multiple colors if that's what you choose. Once you get down to where you feel like this is secure enough, you would trim your yarn. So I've already cut that yarn. And then we'll set this aside. So I'll set this aside. I'll set it right there. And I'll grab my next one, partner up those 2 pieces together, and repeat the process. So let me go ahead and I will wrap this one as well. Okay, so I have wrapped this side as well, and it's time to put these 2 sections together. Now, as you remember, we have a little section here that looks like a hook and a section that looks flat. And we have that on both of these portions of the pom-pom, correct? So what we are going to do is you have to jimmy in the flat section into the hook section on both edges. Can you see that? And then you also need to make sure you do that on this edge as well. So you want to get them all together. So what I have found is if I do the bottom portion first, and I kind of go in like I'm kind of pulling it in like so, and then I kind of fit this one in just like that, it really makes them come together well versus putting both of these 2 in it first and then trying to get these 2. It's best if you do like both the bottom ones and then both the top ones. Once everything is joined together and in place, that's where you will take your scissors and working in that crevice area that I explained before that's created for your scissors, you will now just trim this apart. And this is like one of the most fun things to do. You do want to have a nice sharp pair of scissors when you do this. Make sure you don't cut yourself and just go all the way around the pom-pom maker. You'll notice I'm just rotating it around. And when I get to the end here, snip that. I don't want to take this apart yet, but you can see I have all of these nice trimmings, and they're all just sectioned right there around the pom-pom maker. Now the next part is to pull our pom-pom closed, and usually you can use the same yarn you've used to create your pom-pom to do this part, but sometimes that yarn could be a little bit loose, not spun as tight as it could be, and it will let your pom-pom just poof and fall apart. That's why I like to use Aunt Lydia's cotton thread to pull together my pom-poms. It really cinches them closed nice and tight, and it keeps them together. It also is a great way to secure a pom-pom to the top of the hat. I am going to quadruple my length of Aunt Lydia's thread here because I want to make sure it is nice and strong. I want to make sure I make this thread nice and long because I can use it to secure my pom-pom to the top of the hat. I will take my thread and I want to make sure it's quadrupled. Remember, I have it quadrupled here. And I am going to thread this thread through that same opening that we used for the scissors. Once I thread it through, I'm just going to tie it. Okay, so now I've tied it, and now I'm going to pull this tie really tight, and you can see as I'm pulling it tight, it's pulling that pom-pom closed. Now, that's only one tie, right? And I want to make sure that it's going to stay tied. So what I like to do is I will flip the pom-pom maker over, come up the opposite side through the same section, okay? Give it a tie again and pull it again. So I'm pulling it one more time. I like to do that one more time. Yes, this could be overkill, but honestly, I just want to make sure my pom-pom stays together. Nothing worse than having a pom-pom fall apart on you. Once you feel like you have pulled it nice and secure, as tight as you can, what you're going to do is you're going to take apart the pom-pom. Okay, this is almost magical. You ready? So you take these apart, just like you put it together, take it apart. If I can do this. Oh, I just don't want it to burst. Okay. Here's one section. Here's another section. And then these little bits come out. Here is my thread that I used to pull everything nice and closed, right? So I'm going to make sure I have a hold of that. And then I'm going to give this a good shake. And when I do that, you can see I have a really great pom-pom right here, okay? Now I will trim it up just a little bit just to even out any rough sections. And you can do this over a trash can. Now you can see, even though I thought I was making these long enough, I totally didn't. Look, they're so short. There's no way I can use those to secure them to the top of the hat. So if this is the same situation you find yourself in, it's no problem. All you would do is grab some more of that cotton thread and thread it through the top of the hat you'd want to add your pom-pom to, and then use your tapestry needle to go through the pom-pom itself to make it nice and secure. And hopefully you would grab on to some of this that's on the inside, because this is nice and this is dense. This is really great. So I'm going to clean up my pom-pom here. And to do that, I've grabbed my trash can and I am just going to even this out a little bit. I'm just going around the pom-pom and I'm just making it so it looks a little bit more uniform and there aren't like really big sections poking out. I'm going to leave those little white bits right now, my thread that I used to close it, just so I can find them. And you know what? Because this pom-pom maker was so good, I didn't have to do a whole lot of trimming here. Look at that. Look at that great pom-pom. Oh my gosh, that is an awesome pom-pom. All right, so let's secure this pom-pom to the top of a hat. What do you say? Okay, so we have a pom-pom and not enough string there to attach it. So this is what I'm going to do. I am going to grab some more string, some more cotton thread. This is Aunt Lydia's cotton thread once again. And this is how I secure my pom-poms to the top of the hat, so that way they don't come undone. It has been really successful for me, so hopefully this works for you as well. And all I do is I'm taking a long piece of thread just like I did before, and I will thread this onto my bent tip tapestry needle, which I love. Can you tell? I love this needle. Once I've threaded on there, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to push this tapestry needle right through the center of my pom-pom. And you can't tell on camera, but as I feel this go through, I can feel it going through that center portion that I pulled really tight. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a nice knot, just like I did when this was on the pom-pom maker, okay? Now, you would not have to do this if you made your string long enough already. You don't have to do this, but I did not, so I'm doing it now. All right, so now I could trim those up, but I'm going to leave them right now. Okay, so now I have yarn that is actually attached, which is perfect. So let's use this, pull my hat in, and with the right side of the hat facing you, go ahead and stick your tapestry needle right down the center, right where you want the pom-pom to go, okay? And once you've done that, go ahead and flip it inside out. And just like you did when we were closing up the inside of the hat, really secure down this thread of the pom-pom. So I'm just going in and out through all of this pulled yarn that we have up here at the top. It's really nice and thick up there, so we have a lot of gray area to go through. And what I can do here is I can pop back up through the top here, and you can see, let me see if I can show you. There's my needle. Okay, there's my needle, and I'm going to stick my needle back through the pom-pom once again and try and grab through the pom-pom again, just to get a little bit more secure. So I went up, back down. Oh, that is so nice and tight on there. Come back in here, give it a good pull, and then finish off with your half hitch knot once again. I'm going to cut this off, and now coming up here, I'm going to grab the other side of my thread here and thread it on and go through the same process. This is really a great way to make sure your pom-poms are not going to come undone from the top of the hat, okay? I have had too many friends who have told me they love the way pom-poms look, but they never can get them to stay on the top of the hat. Well, I don't have that problem when I go through all of this trouble of really securing my pom-pom to the top of the hat with all of this cotton thread. It really makes it so much easier. You can see here, I'm getting through all of this section here. It is nice and secure in there. And by quadrupling the thread, you really can give a nice tug on the thread without it breaking, and it just gives it really great security. Let's do this. All right, so for this one, I'm going to go ahead and do my half hitch knot right now. Turn this hat up inside out, right side out, I should say. And we will have a look at this one, and then I will bump back to the hat we were starting off with, so that way you can see what it turned out like as well. I know you can see it behind me right now because I've already finished. I've already taken pictures. I've already done all this stuff. Like I said, I'm so sorry. I just forgot to hit record. Sometimes that is an occupational hazard. All right, so let's see here. See what kind of job I've done. Here's my nice pom-pom. Let's look up here at this front camera. Look at that pom-pom. Oh my gosh. And that is not going anywhere. Look at that. That is awesome. That is nice and secure, super great, right at the top of the hat, right where I needed it to be. And it's ready to go. Let me see. Should I put this one on? Should I put on this? I'll put this one on, and you'll see that I'm going to put the other one on here in a minute too. Let's see here. Oh my gosh, this is the cutest hat. I love this hat so much. Okay, so now you see what it looks like in the lovely blue colorway. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it looks like in the dollhouse. Thanks, guys. Just like so, you see everything's nice and secure. My hat has a nice pom-pom, And there we go. Pretty cool, right? Isn't that just the cutest hat? Hopefully you have made this really adorable hat along with me. This will be a perfect project for anybody in your life who wants to look fun, funky, on trend, and fashionable. You can't go wrong with this really great hat. Super simple, great for beginners and advanced knitters alike. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. You'll give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe so you're up to date whenever there's a new video released. And if you make the hat, make sure you tag me in social media, #MarleyBird. Thanks, guys. Don't leave yet. I'm sure there are other videos here that you will enjoy. Go ahead and check out some of my knitting and crochet videos as well as some of my crafting videos. You will love them, I promise. If you hit subscribe, you'll be up to date whenever there's a new video released. And as my kids say, don't forget to smash that like button. Bye. Everything you need to know about knitting or crochet can be found right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Learn with Marley Bird. Visit youtube.com/Marley Bird.